the first guy I met, it was literally 1 week into my book tour. He was Corporal Phil Aliff, a member of Iraq Veterans Against the War. And he was in Iraq, and I asked him, well, how was it for you over there? How was morale? And he said, well, morale was low. It was not good. We were basically driving around on patrols waiting to get blown up. We called it the IED lottery, the improvised explosive device lottery, basically waiting for a roadside bomb to go off. And we understood that this wasn't about our security. It wasn't about bringing the Iraqi people in any security. It was just basically about being there, driving around, mostly for the media, to show, yeah, we have this presence on the ground. And so he said, we decided to stop doing these patrols. So what we would do is we would go out to the end of our patrol route, we would find a nice big open field, we would park our Humvees, and we would pretend. And we would call into base every hour, and we would say, hey, we're still searching the field for weapons caches. We'll talk to you in another hour. And he said that we called these search and avoid missions. And then about a week ago, well, first of all, then I asked Colonel Aliff, well, how often were you doing this? And he said, oh, about every other day. Everyone was doing it. And I was shocked. I'd never heard that before. And then about a week later, I met another soldier, also active duty, different time of the occupation, different place where he was based in Iraq, same story. We were doing search and avoid missions, a little bit of variation on them. And then a little further into the tour, I met another member of IVAW, a guy named Seth Manzel, who now is outside Fort Lewis in Washington State. And he shared another interesting story of this type of GI resistance that was happening in Iraq, and that by then it started to dawn on me, this is overt GI resistance that we're talking about here. These are soldiers who are refusing to participate in this ongoing illegal occupation. And Seth had found a very creative way to do search and avoid missions without even actually driving around in the vehicles. He managed to find a way to get into the computer in the Humvees and manipulate around the little dot on the GPS that showed their location back at headquarters, and basically just move their dot around as though it was on a patrol. He said you just had to be careful not to move the dot too fast. So really new and interesting and creative ways to do resistance. And I started to dig deeper and deeper, and the deeper I dug, the more different types of resistance I found. And for a little context, our country has a long, rich tradition of GI resistance. All we have to do is look back to Vietnam. We had a GI resistance movement at that time that was absolutely massive and without a doubt helped bring an end to that war. And this happened because enough people got behind this GI resistance movement and supported them and came up and said, what do you need? What do we need to do to help you do more GI resistance? Because then, as many people now understand, and people like the members of Iraq Veterans Against the War, for starters, understand, is that unless there's real GI resistance and real civilian population support for GI resistance, any real talk about ending both of these illegal occupations is just going to be talk. But in Vietnam, we saw that talk translated into action, and we saw what could happen with a very broad, strong, vibrant, powerful civilian anti-war movement that then threw its weight behind a GI resistance movement, enough so that by the end of Vietnam, just about half the soldiers on the ground would not follow orders. So when you have a military and you're a government and you're trying to wage war, and half that military will not follow your orders, it makes it kind of hard for you to wage war. And so that, coupled with a very fierce Vietnamese resistance, helped bring an end to the war in Vietnam. Another example from Vietnam that a lot of people have never heard about is that towards the end of Vietnam, during the height of the massive air bombing campaign against that country, 2 of the United States' 14 aircraft carrier groups were completely taken offline by sabotage from sailors within those boats themselves. So this country does have a very rich history of GI resistance and a tradition that actually has ended one of the biggest wars of the last century. And it certainly can happen again. And this is not pie in the sky stuff. So when we bring it into modern times and talk about GI resistance today, we know that according to Pentagon figures, and it's always safe to assume that figures like these coming directly from the Pentagon itself are on the low end, but according to the Pentagon, we've had well over 55,000 troops so far have gone AWOL since September 11, 2001. Just since, in the Army alone, from 2006 to 2007, we've seen a 42% increase in the number of troops going absent without leave. We're looking at an average of about 10,000 troops every year now that are going absent without leave because they see, for various reasons, anything from I just don't want to go overseas and be in combat to really high moral and ethical reasons. We have many soldiers now that are starting to stand up, even against Afghanistan, soldiers that have a deep understanding of international law and the U.S. Constitution, and understand that if they, as soldiers, agree to be deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan, that's going to be a direct violation of international law. It's going to be therefore a direct violation of the U.S. Constitution and cause them to completely violate the oath they swore as a soldier to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And if these soldiers who put everything on the line to do this, knowing they're going to be court-martialed, knowing they're going to go to jail, knowing they're going to risk losing their benefits, knowing they're probably going to get a dishonorable discharge and catch a lot of hell from their peers, are still willing to stand up and do it, then I think the question we all have to ask ourselves is, what are we willing to do to support these people? Because they're doing it right now, they're doing it every day right here in the U.S. to one degree or another. And people ask me all the time when I give talks now, especially about GI resistance, what can I do? What should we do? What can we do to help these people? Well, this is very easy right now today, because when I finish talking, you can go right over here to Iraq Veterans Against the War's table, and there's a couple of these guys here. They're in the audience right now, and just literally go up and ask these guys, what can I do to help you guys? Because there's plenty of things you can do to support Iraq Veterans Against the War, whether it's making a donation to them or getting with these guys and asking them directly and finding out exactly, okay, here's what I can do. Maybe I can find some vets in my area that I can help support. Maybe there's someone here right now tonight that's today that has orders to deploy, and maybe they're having second thoughts about it, and they're going to need some support. They're going to need a lawyer. They're going to need some civilian support, certainly plenty of moral support. So there's a lot of things that can be done. And what I really want to impress upon you is that there is GI resistance happening, and it is growing as we speak. There's a group out in Oakland called Courage to Resist, and they're an advocacy group for soldiers who are refusing to deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan. And they recently told me that in the last 3 months, they've seen a 200% increase in the number of soldiers who are calling them who are deciding to refuse orders to deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan. And what we need to understand, again, these are not people who are being unpatriotic. These are not people who are just saying, hey, I want to shirk my duty because I'm lazy. But these are people that realize that in order to follow international law and the U.S. Constitution and the oath they swore as soldiers to support and defend the Constitution, they are morally and lawfully obliged to publicly refuse orders to deploy to either of these illegal and immoral occupations. And it's up to us at this point to figure out, now how am I going to support that person? And how am I going to support more people in doing this? Because at the end of the day, if we start doing it here today and find one of these people to support and start carrying that forward and find more people to support tomorrow, that's how a resistance movement is built. We don't just talk about world peace and then get all disgruntled because Obama's not leading us to world peace, or some mythic figure arises from the mist and leads the anti-war movement towards helping create world peace. It starts by each one of us finding, what is it I can do, and going and taking that action right now to start trying to help. In my opinion, I think the most effective thing we can do in this moment is just start finding these soldiers and helping them to resist, because then over time that will add up, and then that will start to form a movement